We call to the stage Fred Taylor from Viasat. Let's welcome Fred.
It's interesting to make an introduction, but I get a podium, please. And then I also got a document. So it is my pleasure to stand here and welcome Lieutenant General Garrant and Lieutenant General LaCory to the stage for a conversation. The General asked me to read his bio, so I'll go through starting from high school all the way forward. I'll cut out this other stuff you don't need for elementary school, but I'll work from there. But what I want to say is, you know who he is. He is the commander of Space Systems Command. He is the one that acquires our space systems. He works with industry and industry partners to acquire those capabilities and sustain those services, and also bring in industry, government, contractors, and guardians. So I won't go into a long array. I think you're going to have a good conversation with these folks up here on the stage. So without further ado, Lieutenant General Phil Garrant.
I specifically told Fred, don't read the bio. Good afternoon, everyone. Fred, thank you for the introduction. It's my pleasure and honor to be with you here today. Before we start, I would like to thank the Space Force Association for this fantastic event. It's my first time, and it's been amazing. These forums are incredibly important. And boy, the earlier speakers weren't kidding. You cannot see anything out there. The discussions that we had yesterday, this morning, and this afternoon are invaluable as we prepare for great power competition and to outpace our adversaries. As you've heard all week, our society's reliance on space has been woven into almost every aspect of our daily lives. Our joint warfighters have grown to be extremely dependent on the capabilities that SSC provides. In fact, the first of General Saltzman's 6 Space Force truths is that U.S. Space Force capabilities are critical to the joint force and the American way of life. Unfortunately, the space domain has become more congested and contested than ever before. We know China and Russia are heavily investing in counterspace capabilities with the intent to present a serious threat to U.S. national security interests in, from, and to space. Threats are no longer emerging, they're here. In times of crisis or conflict, our adversaries are not going to discriminate between military, commercial, or allied systems. Every person here and every satellite on orbit is a target. But our adversaries are not the only ones getting things done and doing more. There's been a rapid rise in commercial proliferation, increased allied partnership in space, and space technology accessibility and growth. And while the developments of industry and our allied partners present numerous benefits, it has resulted in a significant uptick in on-orbit activity. All of these factors have contributed to a more complex, demanding, and opportunity-rich environment requiring a new paradigm and the changing of mindsets. As the primary acquisition hub of the Space Force, SSC is charged with understanding the ever-evolving threat, delivering capabilities to counter it, and determining how to leverage those capabilities to succeed in a great power competition. In order to keep up with these ever-changing space domain and outpace our near-peer adversaries, we're going to need contributions from across this community. It is imperative that we adjust our mindset and break traditional acquisition models in order to deliver dominant space capability. SSC has a legacy of over 70 years of innovation and acquisition excellence. Our founding and predecessor organizations were no strangers to embracing new methodologies and pioneering new technologies to outpace the threats of the era. We must continue to harness that as we foster a culture where our people approach every challenge with a warfighting mindset focused on the threat to deliver war-winning space capabilities. In an effort to help us adopt a new mindset, I recently released a command plan to shift our strategic focus on how we organize, train, and equip the SSC workforce to enable the program executive offices and acquisition teams to out-deliver our adversaries. This plan is the result of many months of collaboration with representatives from all parts of our workforce, other field commands, other acquisition commands and organizations, and even industry partners, some who are here today. The command plan emphasizes the need for a culture where our people are driven by a warfighting mindset, focused on the threat, biased toward action and speed, fueled by a sense of personal and professional accountability, never settling for good enough, and empowered to collaborate with industry and partners to achieve technical, operational, and acquisitions excellence. To echo General Saltzman, you can't direct culture. It must build from the ground up to the top of the organization. It's clear Team SSC is doing just that. Guardians and airmen across SSC are setting the tone for the type of culture we need to succeed in this era of great power competition. The members of our Tactical Surveillance, Reconnaissance, and Tracking Team, or TAC-SRT, are a leading example of having a warfighter mindset with a bias towards action and speed. This team, led by Lieutenant Colonel Hackbarth, has revolutionized traditional acquisition and contracting timelines through streamlined processes and use of the global data marketplace. Through these innovative solutions and partnerships with industry, the TAC-SRT team is able to deliver decision-making information to combatant commanders in under 72 hours. Two members of the team, Captain Osborne and Captain Medina, directly contributed to the U.S. military withdrawal from Airbase 201 in Niger in July and August, as highlighted by General Middleton in his panel earlier today. Utilizing information gathered through an existing partnership with industry, Captain Osborne, Captain Medina, and their team were able to develop a baseline of normal activity, as well as identify areas where protests or unrest would likely begin. During the desired overwatch period, the team was able to pivot and partner with additional commercial providers to obtain and analyze as much electro-optical and synthetic aperture radar imagery as possible to detect any indications of suspicious activity. Throughout the 2-week, 24/7 Operation Surge, their efforts contributed to 34 total daily reports and near real-time updates, averaging a response time from time of scene activity to delivery of a report in 5.5 hours, with their fastest time clocking in at 1.5 hours. The actions of Captain Osborne and Captain Medina, along with the entire TAC-SRT team, have demonstrated the impact innovative solutions and partnerships can have on our ability to rapidly deliver critical capability and decision-making information to our warfighters. In addition to TAC-SRT, our Tactically Responsive Space Program, known as TAC-RS, is another team focused on outpacing the threat by rapidly fielding cutting-edge technologies. This team, led by Colonel Miller, has created a unique culture that challenges conventional acquisition norms by delivering end-to-end missions on aggressive timelines. You may be familiar with some of the capabilities that Colonel Miller and his team have worked tirelessly to deliver, such as Victus Nox and Victus Haze. The members of the TAC-RS team are leaning forward and taking educated risks to deliver effects for space superiority. They have built a culture that emphasizes persistent, continuous improvement to acquire, deliver, and operate capabilities on faster timelines to outpace the threat. They've cultivated strong partnerships with combatant commands, operations teams, and innovative organizations like the Defense Innovation Unit and SpaceWorks to propel their solutions forward and deliver flexible and responsive options that meet warfighter needs. In addition, they are empowered to work directly with industry partners to find solutions to never-before-seen challenges. With their focus on the threat, the TAC-RS team is closing the gap between acquisitions and operations. The threat is too great and our time is too short. This team is empowered to act. Also empowered to act is Tech Sergeant Kyle Dietrich. Sergeant Dietrich is a member of our SSC S2 team and is the NCOIC of Intelligence, and Integration, for the Department of the Air Force's Battle Management and Joint All-Domain Command and Control. In order to make sure our program executive officers are armed with information of adversary space and counterspace systems, we intentionally embedded members of the S2 team, like Sergeant Dietrich, into our acquisition teams. Sergeant Dietrich has been coordinating across Space Force organizations and with combatant commands to create solutions for Space Force level gaps. Through his fusion of intelligence resources and exceptional communication skills, He has enabled resilient acquisition decisions not only for SSC, but for the entire Joint Force. His commitment to informing decision makers and acquisition teams of the threat exemplifies another one of General Saltzman's Space Force truths, that space is a warfighting domain, not a collection of supporting activities. Unfortunately, Sergeant Dietrich isn't here today because he's TDY supporting one of our missions in Colorado, but I'd like to recognize his efforts and his drive to help Team SSC keep our focus on the threat as we deliver warfighting capability. While the counterspace threats that we've been highlighting require significant attention, we can't forget that there are threats here on our home turf. First Lieutenant Casey Folk from the 30th Security Forces Squadron at Vandenberg, is charged with protecting our people and systems against these threats. Lieutenant Folk is leading the 30th Security Force Squadron's Innovation Cell, where he's responsible for the installation of the Android Tactical Assault Kit, or ATAC. Lieutenant Folk's innovative drive was pivotal to the Delta's recent response to an active shooter. His unique understanding of the system and ability to rapidly incorporate it into operations was critical in standing up the Delta's command and control node, which enabled quick integration among Space Force assets essential for deconflicting and confirming reports related to drone activity. And there was a press release in the news recently. You might have seen the outcome of that. We had a foreign national get arrested at the airport, directly attributed to Lieutenant Folk's activities and actions. I'm comforted to know that we have airmen like Lieutenant Folk on our team whose dedication not only bolstered Vandenberg Space Force Base's defense, but protected our ability to execute our mission. It is essential that we continue to develop our Guardians to embrace the threat-focused warfighter mindset demonstrated by the TAC SRT team and TAC RS team, along with Tech Sergeant Dietrich and First Lieutenant Folk. We are also dedicated to fostering an environment where our Guardians have the highest standards of personal and professional accountability, never settling for good enough in striving for a world-class workforce. I'd like to highlight a couple individuals who consistently seek opportunities to improve processes and whose daily actions contribute to SSE's premier workforce. Master Sergeant Randy Pagala and Miss Rosie Lopez are setting the standard for what can be achieved by taking calculated risks, thinking outside the box, and driving for innovative solutions. Master Sergeant Pagala is the superintendent of the deployment and distribution flight within the 45th Logistics Readiness Squadron. He steers the largest LRS flight in the Space Force and manages deployment processing and Air Force force generation actions for all tenant units being employed in support of combatant commanders for global contingency operations. He led Patrick Space Force Base's first force generation exercise in a decade. He created planning orders and command and control products to support the exercise mass deployment of 46 deployers in an Indo-Pacific scenario. As the Delta lead, he led all planning phases for the Inspector General inspection, galvanizing SLD 45 capabilities for great power competition. Master Sergeant Pagala's innovative efforts provided airmen and Guardians with an experience that mimicked a real-world mass deployment scenario and exercised critical base processes in support of the warfighter. Ms. Lopez is a management analyst within the 45th Force Support Squadron. She developed the first ever Installation Support Program Objective Memorandum for over 200 billets and $150 million, which set the benchmark for SLD 45 and SLD 30. When she saw the need for improvement, she led the creation of 8 new child and youth program positions and the establishment of a new organizational structure for food services. By not settling for good enough for our people, Ms. Lopez is fostering a supportive community and improving quality of service for members of both Patrick and Vandenberg Space Force bases. Master Sergeant Pagala and Ms. Lopez, if you're in the audience, can you please stand and wave so we can see you? I can't see you, but the audience will be able to see you. Thank you for what you do in support of the mission. I'd like to pivot now to 2 of our Guardians who pursued an opportunity with a sister service to develop themselves personally and professionally, and in doing so have had an incredible impact on SSC and the Space Force. First Lieutenants Jordan Savage and Jackson Jennings demonstrated incredible personal and professional accountability by becoming the first Guardians to earn Stetsons and spurs. Lieutenant Savage and Jennings volunteered to complete a grueling 30-hour spur ride alongside candidates from the Army's 1st Armored Brigade team in Fort Bliss, Texas. This experience provided them with a unique insight into how our warfighters are operating in the field and how they, as Guardians, fit into joint operations. While I know this opportunity was incredibly rewarding to them on a personal level, the lessons they learned and have fed back into our program offices are invaluable as we cultivate a workforce that understands the operational importance of space and how that delivers capability to the Joint Force. Not only are they contributing to our SSC and Space Force culture, but they've been a fantastic representative of the Guardian spirit to our brothers and sisters in arms. Huge kudos to Lieutenant Savage and Jennings for having the courage to develop themselves professionally and personally and being a positive influence on fellow Guardians and joint warfighters. One of the major takeaways from their experience was that we can achieve greater things through teamwork. As SSC races to deliver warfighting capabilities to outpace our adversaries, there is one fundamental truth. We cannot do it alone. In this historically complex space environment, it's essential that we have a joint mindset and partner at all opportunities to be successful. And we recognize there's a significant value in engaging with our international partners. Our nation's integrated deterrence strategy requires robust collaboration and information sharing with our allies. Over the last year, SSC has been committed to growing allied partnerships to deliver a number of game-changing capabilities. I'd like to take time to highlight one team in particular, Major Hartley, Mr. Provenchain, and Mr. Feeney from the Enhanced Polar System Recapitalization Team, or EPSR for short. I believe Major Hartley's in the audience today. Dale, could you please stand and wave? All right. The EPSR team demonstrated what can be achieved through partnership by aligning with Space Norway to launch 2 satellites with EPS hosted payloads in August of this year. The event marked the first time a DoD operational payload was hosted on an international satellite. These payloads were hosted on Norway's Arctic satellite broadband mission, consisting of 2 satellites owned by Space Norway and launched atop a commercially procured SpaceX Falcon 9. The EPSR and Space Norway teams worked hand in hand to certify all launch and checkout processes required to ship space vehicles from the Northrop Grumman facility in Dulles to the SpaceX facility at Vandenberg for a successful launch. The collaboration didn't end with the launch. Major Hartley and his team have worked closely with Space Norway and Northrop to complete on-orbit testing, pulling overnight shifts to complete the activation and calibration of the payloads ahead of schedule. The combined success of the team and Space Norway enables secure, 24/7 protected SATCOM capability within the North Polar region, saving approximately $900 million for the U.S. government. The EPSR team has paved the way for partnering with allies for hosted payloads, and they're not the only team at SSC capitalizing on this innovative concept. Lieutenant Colonel Fredrickson and his team, Major Hammond, Captain Maxwell, and Lieutenant Fierer, just recently completed a major milestone for the Quasi-Zenith Satellite System hosted payload program known as QZSS-HP. In fact, our executive director, Ms. Joy White, traveled to Japan just a couple weeks ago to participate in a ribbon-cutting ceremony celebrating both our long-standing partnership with Japan and the delivery of payloads in preparation for their launch. The team's innovative approach will deliver much-needed space domain awareness capability, and it provides a basis for future opportunities with allied partners. And as proliferation of both friendly and adversary space-based systems in GEO increases, this capability supplies critical information and diversifies our presence in GEO. QZSS is a pace-setting and pathfinding space cooperation initiative, and we are grateful for the growing partnership with Japan in this area. We look forward to the launches of these systems, with the first planned for early of this year, coming year, and second later on in 2025. Lieutenant Colonel Fredrickson and the rest of the QZSS-HP team are a testament to the ways in which allied partnership can strengthen our integrated deterrence and international security. The EPSR and QZSS teams are a shining example of partnering to win and our innovative approaches to delivering capabilities that not only benefit the Joint Force, but our allied partners. SSC recognizes that we need our partners to succeed in this era of great power competition, and we are continuing to refine our approaches to deliver as much capability as we can on operationally relevant timelines. The SSC motto is that space starts here, but space starts first with the enterprising people of SSC, who have delivered for over 70 years of innovation and excellence. Our military Our nation and our allies rely on SSE's ability to deliver space-based capabilities that protect our nation, enable our critical infrastructure, and fuel our economy. We are committed to organizing, training, and equipping a workforce that fields capabilities that are threat-informed and deliver combat-credible effects to maintain our current competitive advantage and establish a foundation for enduring dominance. Thank you, and Semper Supra. And while she walks on stage, I can't do any of this without my awesome senior enlisted leader, Chief Jackie Salve.
Center. Thanks, sir.
Absolutely.
Do you want to sit in the center?
No,
Okay.
go right ahead. Well, it's great to be back on stage with both of you. It's great to be here representing a couple organizations, SFA, your host for Spacepower, and First Command Financial Planning, one of your sponsors for the event. Let's start with something that I found very interesting, maybe a little bit unique for an organization such as yours that acquires hardware and all the cool gadgets that we put on orbit or use on the ground to help on orbit. You just alluded to releasing your command plan. And as I read that plan, and for those of you that haven't, it's posted, and I encourage all of you to read it, because you ought to know exactly what they're thinking about from the perspective of the hardware and the kit that they're looking to provide you and how they're looking to provide that. But what I found unique was it would make perfect sense for that plan to be full of a focus on hardware. But instead, you both took an approach that pivoted and focused on the people side of things and what it is they do to deliver that hardware. And so I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you as a leadership team came up with that approach, what benefits you thought you might see, and how's it going so far?
Okay. Do you want me to take it first?
Yeah.
All right, sir, thanks. So I appreciate the question, sir. I mean, simply put, without our people, there is no mission. Absolutely. And so as we think about that, we took the approach really to deliberately looking at our folks and really supporting their readiness overall. Because first and foremost, without that, we cannot achieve our mission. And so investing in them is one of the most important things that we really wanted to focus on as part of our command plan. I mean, if you think about the environment today, we've listened, today and even yesterday, the threat in the environment, it is fast-paced and it is evolving. And not only is the environment evolving, you think about the technology that continues to evolve. And so what are we doing to ensure that our folks today and really into the future are prepared for whatever crisis, whatever they are going to face? And even furthermore, is what are we doing for our junior folks, right, to ensure that they are ready for that? And so when you talk about, well, what are the benefits? What are we going to do to ensure, what are we getting out of this command plan? For me, it's really, to be able to achieve and increase the empowerment, not just at the mid-grade level, but at the junior level, at the lowest level possible. And I know for folks, it's a little bit uncomfortable, right, to hand them this big project or to make them lead, for a lieutenant or A1C, a specialist 3, to lead these big things. But we have to put them in those uncomfortable positions where we can, we're able, so that way they continue to grow and thrive, and not only from the growth and thriving standpoint, but it's also from the confidence that they gain from that. One step further is the trust that you're now building between subordinate and leader. That subordinate is going to say, my leader absolutely trusts me to do this. And even though I may fail, he's going to let me fail, but I'm going to figure it out on the back end. And I know he or she's going to provide me with that feedback. And really, that's what it's about. To your point of how do we think it's going, I think we've done a really good job in bringing in really a diverse population of our folks to provide input to our actual command plan. So before we actually published it, we allowed verse from across the command to provide feedback on, hey, how do you see yourself in this command plan? What are we missing?
Perfect.
And external partners as well. But sir, I'll hand it over to you.
Top that. I'll tell you what, maybe that says it all for that particular
Okay.
question. Let's
Check the block.
you can't mic drop a lavalier, but it's close enough.
Well,
We got
kind of. Yeah, I'll try. Yeah.
Let's talk about so people related, but it's more organizational construct. That Space Force, with your team, with General Miller's team, and several of the other acquisition organizations have started this new concept of integrated mission deltas, as well as kind of a sister concept of system deltas. What can you tell the crowd who maybe has heard about it, read about it in an article, but no kidding, how's it going on the ground? What are we seeing, and how is that working?
Sure. So we now have 4 mission deltas. The two pilots were PNT and electronic warfare. We recently stood up space domain awareness and missile warning. I think the greatest accomplishment that this has highlighted is communication and collaboration at the lowest levels of echelon. So before, if there was a challenge, it was happening at the PEO and General Miller or myself at General Miller, and now we've got folks deep in the ops side and the acquisition side collaborating. It's really getting after General Saltzman's vision of a single commander being responsible for all parts of readiness, people, training, systems, and sustainment. We have put professional acquirers into these mission deltas and helping the operators learn that trade. The example I've used, we have a couple of systems that are close to ops acceptance, OCX and Atlas, and I will tell you that by putting those systems into mission deltas and working day to day with the operators, we know that we're going to be able to ops accept and put those systems into operations faster. Prioritizing where we're spending important sustainment dollars. And then on the acquisition side for PNT and EW, we have analogous organizations focused on programs that are a little bit earlier in the life cycle, not quite ready to transition, but again, driving that connection and where we can, having a one-to-one relationship. So incredible wins. We've started the work, Rock Miller and his team, Mark Brock and Rob Davis and my team, really getting after what's the good construct for that, and we're working with plans to get approval from General Saltzman for even more mission deltas in the next calendar year. A challenge that we've experienced and we're learning from and applying as we stand up these new mission deltas and the systems deltas is, and I kind of alluded to it with Atlas and OCX, when is the right time to put a program into the mission delta? And it needs to be a deliberate acceptance of risk to perhaps put something in a little bit sooner than maybe we're comfortable with. So we're pretty pleased with the success we're seeing and working through that, and excited to have this construct for all of the mission areas by the end of the calendar year 25.
It's pretty cool to hear that the initial results are proving the theory and bringing it into reality. So that's super. For those that haven't had a chance to read the plan yet, to go back again to the people side of this, one of the other things that I thought was an interesting take, and I even haven't thought about it this way before, but there's a focus in one of the lines of effort on mentoring. And most of us think of mentoring as a transactional type relationship. There's a receiver and there's a giver type thing. So that's absolutely one half of the equation in this, but you've also highlighted, if we're going to have someone that's going to be a mentor, maybe we need to teach them how to be a mentor and those type of things. So you kind of have two halves of this. I've never thought of it that way before, but I said, you know what, this is another one of these cases where there's some forethought that went into this. Could you maybe elaborate? I can let either one of you touch on that, but go for it.
I see the boss looked at me. As we look at LOE2, right, workforce development, it is definitely more than just ensuring that we are training our folks a little bit differently, right? We can't rely on old traditional methods of how we used to train, how we teach, and to ensure that they're ready for anything, really. And so beyond just the training of the technical skills, I mean, you also have to think about how are we continually growing our folks, helping them achieve their fullest potential. But on the other side that you highlighted also is really the mentorship piece. So for the mentorship piece, we realized, I did hear some comments of, well, hey, I would love to be a mentor, but how do I become a successful mentor? I know, in the past I've had mentors where, they have absolutely told me, here's where you need to be, not realizing, these are my long-term goals. They don't really align with what, you have told me. But so those things I think are going to be very important for our folks as we stand up our mentorship program. For the mentees as well, it's very important for them to also get trained and educated on how to be a good mentee. Because oftentimes, folks, they collaborate, they sit with their mentor one-on-one, but then they don't do the follow-up, or they don't maybe know how to ask the right questions. So those things are going to be very important, right? The training, education, understanding that as a leader, as a military professional in your growing path, it is an integral piece, right? And then obviously the mentorship aspects of this is going to be important.
That's great. Let's see if we can squeeze 2 more questions in here. So one of the other items that I noticed in LOE number 1, which was align and prioritize resources, you reference trying to do the POM in a different way. You recognized someone a few minutes ago who was building the installation POM, but having sat in your previous seat before you, and now General Bratton, if he's out there, gets to do the budget build these days. But I could only think that as you wrote this, you were thinking about some of the challenges you may have had as the Chief Strategy and Resourcing Officer building a Space Force POM and thinking, how do I start earlier in the process as a field command commander and help General Bratton and Brian Denaro out as they build the POM for us? So unpack that a little bit from what you put in the plan and what you're hoping to do.
Absolutely, and the plan from a resource perspective, there's actually 2 pieces. There's a people part to that as well, and I'll quickly address that. So last year, Honorable Calvelli identified Colonel Corey Klopstein as the OTTI, Operational Test and Training Infrastructure PEO, and stood up a program office. Well, Corey was a program office of 1. He had no resources. So we took a deliberate process to look across the command to identify billets and people to fully and appropriately staff him so he can actually execute the acquisition mission that he's been charged with. So that was a piece of it. And then growing on the fantastic work that I inherited that started probably with you with the Tri-Field Command approach to building a POM and leveraging that, working really closely with STARCOM and SPOC and the S8 is truly a bottoms-up focus. As you well remember, we doubled our budget in 3 years in the Space Force. I like to say that never would have happened if we were not an independent service, a separate service, excuse me. Your big first focus was on missile warning and our contribution to strategic deterrence. Getting after avoid operational surprise, the first element of General Saltzman's competitive theory of success. And then we did a pivot in our transition from you to me on supporting the joint warfighter and a big emphasis on satellite data communication, as well as working with our fantastic partner, Dr. Derek Turner in the Space Development Agency, on a proliferated architecture. And that gets after the second tenet of deny first maneuver advantage through this resiliency. So that was the previous few POMs, but what we're seeing now and the big focus with the team and this review of where can we spend the few dollars we have, where's the most important, and that's really the focus, is we can't keep doing everything. We need to be deliberate and we need to make the tough choices to get after the General Saltzman's priorities. That's his third tenet, conducts responsible space superiority operations. So what you're seeing this year that the 3 field commands are doing is a big focus on space superiority, space control, offensive and defensive, as well as space domain awareness. So it's really building on the work that you started with the field commands at the creation of the Space Force, leveraging the relationships with the field comm commanders and making sure we're hand in glove with Gov and his team on making really tough decisions and prioritizing in line with General Saltzman's priorities, making sure we can get after the space capabilities and the Joint Force capabilities.
All right. Well, let's do one last question. And this was another, I think you look at it as a central premise. It was certainly something that jumped out at me in the command plan, and that was, as you phrase it, you're looking for SSC personnel with a warfighting mindset and a bias for action. And in that section, it talks about innovative acquisition approaches. Having now been kind of on the other side for just short of 2 years, I hear and I feel a sense in industry that they are encouraged by us talking about and implementing some innovative acquisition approaches. so that we can do things faster. Many up here on this stage this week have highlighted how commercial industry is pushing things faster and faster. A lot of times on the government side, we're working through what it is on the bureaucracy side of it. So for those that maintain a healthy skepticism of whether we can do this at scale as opposed to in small prototyping efforts, how do you plan to get after that?
Sure, and hopefully folks got to hear Colonel Rich Nisley earlier in the commercial, and immediately following, we're going to have all 6 PEOs up here. It's changing the mindset of what a program office looks like, how large or how small that program office can be, leveraging lessons learned from Dr. Kelly Hammett at Space RCO, at the DAF RCO, the traditional Space Superiority Organization, which are a little bit smaller, and getting after that. Another POM priority that we're doing in 27 that I didn't mention is a deliberate emphasis on commercial. So that's a forethought, not an afterthought. Same thing with Allied by Design. It needs to be part of the design, not an afterthought after the design. My commitment at Space Industry Days in October was a transparent engagement with industry and asking them to help grade our homework. So those communications and the trust in the relationships are incredibly important. I think the big message, if the Space Force has consistently said that we need more funding to fund all of the efforts, estimates anywhere from 20 to 30 billion in addition to the 30 billion to be able to execute what we need for the Joint Force as well as what capabilities we need for those 3 theories of success. We know that the workforce isn't going to grow very large, so something has to change. And we are seeing a mindset change. We learn a lot from each other. I like to talk in terms of superpowers when we talk about the people who do Space Force acquisition, whether it's us, whether it's Kelly Hammett, whether it's Derek Tournier. Kelly, by statute, is JSIDS exempt and gets his requirements directly from General Whiting. Derek has mastered the art of mid-tier acquisition and going fast and using other transaction authorities. You're seeing our PEOs look at those tools and use them to get after things. Rob Davis might talk about Forge and how he's using OTAs to get after to award contracts to non-traditionals to start smaller instead of these big, large programs. Mr. Calvelli has said ground's got to be available before the satellite gets launched, and we saw in the draft NDAA to be signed into law. It's not yet, but the idea that now we have to certify that that's the case or get a SecAF waiver. So, in my comments, I talked about the mind shift and the change in the tone. And then I want to give Chief the last word, but I'd like her to talk a little bit about how it's not just the Guardians doing acquisition who are changing their mindsets. We spent Monday at SLD 45 with General Pansahagen and got to visit with a lot of her folks that run that mission, and tremendously under-resourced to keep up with the commercial demand and capacity of launch in areas that aren't Guardians, security forces, defenders, civil engineering, EOD techs. But Chief, could you talk a little bit about how we're going to help them through the command plan?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, sir. So we, as I stated, I think earlier, very briefly, we absolutely, when we looked at the command plan as a whole, we had a heavy emphasis on everyone in the command, not just our acquisition, LA, transitioning from being a center to now a full-on field command. We absolutely expanded, understanding we have 27 geographically separated locations. I still don't know where all of them are, but that's besides the point. The point is that we need to consider all of our folks in that plan, and the biggest thing for us is, do you see yourself in that plan, and how do you fit right in the lines of effort? In the command plan, we made the adjustment to our mission and vision statement so that folks can actually connect to it, so that when someone asks anyone from SSC, hey, what's your mission, what do you do? It's easy for them to be able to roll that out of the tongue and really connect and be passionate about how they help, how they support our mission. And the biggest thing really is, especially when we look at our line of effort too and the development of the workforce, is how can we incorporate them into that development of the workforce, right? Is it through ensuring, as we onboard them, ensuring that they understand the space mission, the acquisition mission, even if it's just a quick 101, that those little things help them connect and become stronger to our mission. And so I think we're moving in the right direction, sir. I know we have lots of work left to do. But it's really going to take, really, from the leaders, but on down, for everyone to understand, create that shared understanding, and move forward as a team to accomplish the mission in the end. Yeah.
Well, thank you both on multiple fronts. First, for coming on stage with the heat lamps here and sharing all of this with the crowd here. But thanks for the great work that your PA team does. I still follow all of you that are posted up on social media, where the one common theme that I see as you are both visiting places is your PA team does a wonderful job. I mean, you're a handsome guy, Phil, and they could zoom right in, but the team uses a nice zoom and backs out to make sure that every photo is the two of you doing it together, as well as whatever team you're going to visit, because that's really what you want to highlight, as opposed to here's General Garrant here, here's General Garrant there, and I would say most folks here would say it comes off when the two of you are on stage here talking about it. It's not just a photo thing, it's how you live and breathe and lead the command together, and it is really refreshing to talk to both of you today. So thank you very, very much for what you're doing.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you all.